How's it going, Andrew?
Hey, Matt, what's going on?
Not much, man. I'm exhausted right now. I drove to Mount Horeb for a 2-year-old's birthday party today with the wife and kiddo. And
Hanging out on the Trolls Highway.
Yep, and then drove back, and now I'm here recording with you. So,
So you're ready to pod.
yeah, sure, something like that.
Yeah, I had a nice and restful day.
Good for you.
I feel good. I feel strong. Went to the zoo yesterday for the first time with the
Nice.
little kiddo.
How'd that go?
He didn't seem to notice most of the animals except the fish tanks.
Oh, yeah.
When I held him up to the fish tanks, I think he thought they were like flying or something. He was mind blown.
Yeah.
Just staring around like, that's a big what the?
Well, and especially with certain ones with the way they like distort your vision because of the thickness of the glass and stuff. Yeah, that'll trip a kid out pretty
He was
quick,
tripping
too. Yeah.
hard on these fish, dude. Just like, whoa.
Zoe loves that area as well. We'll have to do that one Friday while you're still on leave, where we both take off or both head to the zoo with the kids.
Yeah, we should do that. I got a zoo pass. Ready to rock.
So do we.
Easy peasy.
All right. Well, why don't we just get into this?
Do.
Loosen up your ties and roll up your sleeves. It's time for Fellowship with Matt and Andrew. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are not necessarily the views and opinions of the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin or any other Grand Lodge or any appended body.
Well, what do you got for us today, Andrew?
I had an idea. So last year I had done an education piece for our lodge on the importance of the opening and closing rituals, which is kind of a Masonic thing. And, Blue Lodge does it. And my understanding is almost every Masonic side body has a version of an opening and closing,
Right.
Any appended body. So I wanted to talk why. Why is this important and why do we hold on to it? So I kind of wanted to talk about that today.
All right. Awesome. I'm up for it because, I agree with you on this. However, you get to be the one leading this conversation because you're the more knowledgeable one, let's say.
So I had originally thought of this education piece when I was reading a book called, I think it's Observant Freemasonry. I'll put it in the show notes when I look up which book it was, but it was a book that was kind of talking about different ways that you can, spice up your lodge. And that was using a lot of traditional things, kind of making sure communication was good. It had various suggestions. And one of them was talking about the opening and closing and how important it was. And it got me thinking. So the opening and closing of the lodge, I started to notice, I think it's very important. And I think it serves a very important purpose. And I think for me, sometimes I can get frustrated because some lodges or individuals might treat it like more of a formality than anything.
Right. Like it's something you just have to go through the motions on, which isn't necessarily true. It holds a place of significance.
Yeah, and I think that when you actually start to pay attention and really let it do its work, it's actually a very powerful tool. So I believe that the opening and closing rituals within all these bodies actually endeavor to benefit Masons and Star and all these different groups. I think that is there as a support system to support our ideology. And I think it does so through creating an exclusive environment, reinforcing our language, so our symbolic language and symbols. And then I'd like to think it does something called Masonic synchronization.
Ooh, that's an interesting term. I like it. You want to explain that a little bit more? I know where you're going with it, but...
So yeah, let's start with Masonic synchronization. So synchronization is kind of the idea that... that minds can be kind of aligned with one another. So you can feel that in music. If everyone's listening to the same drum beat or the song, you're kind of all linked together by that experience at that exact moment.
Right.
And people can feel synchronization. Sometimes you can complete your friend's sentences. Exactly where his brain goes because you're how they think. You kind of can get into their head. You're sharing a bond. And I think that our opening and closing ritual endeavors to create that for the brethren sitting within the opening and closings and across space and time because they're all sharing in one moment at the exact same time in the exact same place, a shared experience, which is following, especially if you're paying attention, you're not in your phone, you're zoning out or, sleeping, doing whatever you're going to do, that you're actually following the movements and the words all together at the same time, that all the brethren in that room's minds are temporarily aligned with one another on the exact same experience. And I think that's a powerful tool.
Well, and if you think about it on that note too, it's not even just about the people that are sitting in the lodge room. And granted, the way it's done from jurisdiction to jurisdiction may differ. It's basically the same premise, right? So you're not just connecting with the men in those rooms, but you're connecting with anybody in the world who's ever opened and closed a lodge, anybody in history who's ever opened and closed a lodge, and anybody in the future who's going to open and close a lodge.
You're like connected through time and space. And I think it's interesting because the importance of ritual, oftentimes, like we talked in a past podcast about how there's a morning ritual and how there's lots of rituals that benefit people, is that it's repetitive. Right. It's intentionally repetitive. And so I remember when you were making fun of me for being away for the first quarter of the month, I was saying how I felt when you misstated you feel out of sync or out of the loop.
Yep.
And I would argue that part of that is that you missed your synchronization period where you come into lodge and you get realigned with everyone there and you're kind of reestablishing your Masonic life. You're reestablishing it every month and you're sharing that with the brethren in the room with you too. And why that's a powerful tool too is it creates an exclusive environment, and exclusive kind of has a weighted word, but
right.
But it's not really in like the snooty, what an exclusive club. But technically we are kind of exclusive in the way that not everyone can see this.
Like any private organization, yeah, we are exclusive. Like nobody can just walk into the board meeting of a large publicly traded company, right? So there is exclusivity in things. There's nothing wrong with the things being only for its members. And, we are one of those organizations, so that what happens in there is, for its members.
And then when we do an open and close, it actually delineates, now we're in an exclusive tiled space, meaning this is just for us.
Right.
And within the ritual, and I can talk very high level, but can't go into too much detail, it reminds everyone in the room who's all here, what are your jobs?
Yep.
And what is our philosophy? Because it kind of runs through that in small chunks through symbol. And in that way, you're kind of you're setting the tone for the room like, all right, we're here. We are Masons. Remember, we're going to act like Masons as we go about the business of the day.
Right. Well, and it sets the tone too, right? If your opening is kind of sloppy or, you cut corners on it and stuff like that, you're probably going to do the same thing during your business meeting and with the business you need to handle. Whereas if you have very well structured opening and you do things the way they're supposed to be, you're setting the tone for the seriousness of the business in which you're about to engage.
Which can help you stay more organized too. And you'll see that like if an opening starts and it's like a joke, like people are making fun of people, they're laughing and goofing around, the meeting that follows is equally as disruptive, goofy. And it's not the end of the world by any means, but I think when we try to think as Masons, how we're trying to like perfect our ashlers, it's important to know that there's a time for fun and there's a time for business. And when you're in labor and at business time, your goal shouldn't be, I'm going to make this the most fun and entertaining. Your goal should be, I'm going to make this as efficient and productive as possible, which then will make more time for, education or afterwards or before entertainment and fellowship and enjoying one another's company.
Well, that's not to say that you can't still get away with cracking jokes and, if something funny happens during the business meeting, by all means, roll with it, right? You gotta keep it a little bit lighthearted, but I feel like it can always come right back to business if you've taken it seriously from the opening. And, no opening's ever going to be perfect. No closing's ever going to be perfect. People are going to make mistakes, but it's a matter of taking it seriously, right?
Yep. And creating for just that, an opening takes, what do you think, 5 minutes?
Yeah, it depends on the degree, but maybe I would say we could call it 10 minutes.
Yeah, like 10 minutes. Just saying, okay, just for 10 minutes, treat this with an air of reverence, because if the lodge is a symbol for the individual and the world, so it's double meaning a lot of the time in the symbolism.
Right.
Then if you can give the self-respect to just that 10 minutes going, okay, I know we were goofing around, the gavel dropped, let's just, for 10 minutes, let's observe, let's be present, and let's just take a moment to give reverence to the craft and to our lodge. And then once the meeting starts, it gets a little more lax, for sure.
Right.
But it's important, I think, to treat that well, because it is kind of like a symbol in its own right to the interior of a Mason. Because within the ritual, you kind of also remind yourselves of our symbol. And you'll notice that in small ways with the way that if you look closely, every part of it is reminding you, let's say we're using the MM opening, every part of it is a reminder of the other degrees, and all that goes with them is packed within the symbols used within that opening ritual. So if you allow yourself to look at it and go, all right, that's the Ended Apprentice. I must remember to do A and B. That's part of our philosophy. That's fellowcraft. It can realign you with what you should be doing to live up to Masonic philosophy.
Right. I totally agree with you. And, as I'm currently sitting in the East right now, I think I take opening and closing very seriously, especially because, one of my tasks is to set the craft at work. And that's the beginning of work and the ending of work. So I think you need to bookend it with solid openings and closing.
Well, and if you remember our conversation with worshipful brother, Pat Choka, where he was talking about how the closing has a, what's the word when a priest sends everyone out back into the world?
Right. It's got like it's sending a message to remember to take the values that you practice in the lodge room out into the real world. I can't remember exactly how he said it, but
there's a defined word that means that. But yes, that's the gist of what it means. And that's another important part about the closing. The opening sets the tone. The closing sends you out and reopens the doors, untiles, and goes, now that you've been resynchronized, and be a Mason. And I think if a Mason, doesn't go to lodge very often, doesn't see that, the lessons of your degrees can kind of get rusty or like a little overgrown because it's not always on your mind. And so another thing that I think is important is it is reinforcing our language and symbols every single time you see one. And the point is that it's repetitive, because what you keep on your mind is kind of affects your ideology and how you think about your day. So for example, I think there was this thing they were talking about how what we are able to conceive through our language is how we see our world. Like Eskimos have like a ridiculous amount of words for snow. So they can suddenly define some snow that's slushy and some that's more slushy, whereas we might just call it slush so we can't see it. Or colors is a good thing. Like if you just go, that's white, and someone else goes, well, no, that's eggshell white, and that's some other type of white. The fact that they were able to create a language to delineate the difference creates the reality in their mind. And so when it comes to being a Mason, one important thing to integrating our ritual is to keep it on our mind so that we have an opportunity to actually maybe grab our working tool and use it. And I think the opening and closing ritual endeavors to help you with that process by keeping it on your mind.
I would agree for sure. And, looking at it from a different perspective, it's easy sometimes to stop paying attention after a while of the repetitiveness and stuff like that. But if you're a junior steward or a senior steward, or even a sideliner aspiring to be in the line especially, or a sideliner that might get called upon to help out one night, if you go to enough stated meetings and you just actively pay attention, if you're an active listener during opening and closing, I guarantee after a year, you might not be able to do it perfectly, but you could almost open and close a lodge yourself, especially after like 2 years of hearing it. And if you're somebody sitting in the line, that's what's going to help you learn your next chair up, is the constant active listening and paying attention to and watching of what's going on during that. So by the time you get to the East, you shouldn't even really need to study to open and close a lodge, because you should almost know it already.
Well, and there's a power to having an active ear, and that's actually spoken on in our fellowcraft degree.
Right.
And the importance of being present and listening. And yes, I know it's repetitive, sure, but it takes fortitude and it takes concentration to say, I know I've seen it, but I'm going to watch it again, and I'm going to watch closely to allow it to do the work it endeavors to do on my mind. And I'm going to let the mind be contemplative. And I know that, some people would be like, well, we're just here to get our business done. It's like, yes, and you can do that. But for those who would like to allow the opening and closing to serve a higher function, to help you remember what you intend to do with Masonic philosophy and how to be as a Mason, it is sitting there waiting for the attentive ear and the eyes to watch it closely.
But I think you just brought up something very interesting there, and it demonstrates the complete wrong attitude about going to a stated meeting, right? We're just here to do business. Well, okay, you're already off to a bad start with that. The business that you have to undertake, it might not be the most exciting business on the face of the planet, but it is relevant to your lodge surviving and operating well, right? So if in your mind you're going, well, we're just here to do business, why do we need to make sure the opening and closing is on point? You're already thinking about it the wrong way.
And it's serving, that's the thing is the meeting itself is serving a multiple function. It is serving the opening and closing to be some of the purpose I talked about, reinforcing symbolism, creating exclusive inclusive space, and synchronizing the brethren. So there's that at the front. The capstone does that again, but sends you out with a mission to live as a Mason.
Yep.
And then in the middle, that's where you're like, and now we'll do business. Before the meeting or after the meeting, it's like, now we're going to do fellowship. And then if you slot education in, you're actually oftentimes filling all the brotherly love, relief, and truth buckets, because on one end, you're doing truth work, which is letting the philosophy teach. And if you have education, boom, that's supported. In business is where you'll oftentimes do your charity work. That'll usually be a part if you're doing something. And then fellowship is capstoning or is on one side or the other or both. So you're actually doing all three.
Right.
Ideally.
Well, and if you wanted to put it in different terms, you could look at it like a solid workout. You have your warm up and you have your cool down afterwards. You warm up with some fellowship, get everybody nice and in the mood and fed and ready to go.
Feeling happy to see each other again.
Then you get into the meaty part of your workout, right? The part that might be a little bit of a grind sometimes, but a little bit fun here, too, and there, and you're going to learn something about yourself. You're going to take something away from it. You're going to learn something about Masonry, whatever. And then you have your cool down, which is the fellowship afterwards, which lets you unwind after having your serious part of it.
Yep.
So I feel like having all three of those is critical to being able to take that part of your meeting part of the night more seriously, because if you don't warm up for it, you're going to just want to be having fun when you're in. And if you don't cool down afterwards, you're going to not take it as seriously while you're in there, because you're still going to want to be having fun because nothing comes afterwards.
Yep. Well, and not to mention, like we were talking, so like some meetings can just suck. Like I've seen bad meetings where it's drawn out, it's long, and you're like, I am going to die. I'm not going to survive.
They're not always great, and they can't always be, because sometimes it depends what you got to get.
But I'm saying, what I'm trying to reference is the respect of the efficiency of the meeting, and that the opening sets your tone, like we were saying, to try to run it as effectively as possible. And an effective meeting is a more enjoyable meeting. Because if you have 10 people arguing about what plates to get to put pancakes on, that's not a fun meeting.
Right. No, and I agree with you there, but like I'm saying, sometimes it's unavoidable. For instance, our May meeting is going to be unavoidably long because there is 20 resolutions for annual communications this year, and they're going to have to be read.
Yep.
There's no efficient way around that, unfortunately.
But there is a more inefficient way.
Right. Oh, I'm sure there's a more inefficient way, but you understand what I'm getting at. I mean, we can probably paraphrase them and send them out ahead of time. Make sure, be like, everybody read these before the stated meeting. So everybody has an idea what they are. So maybe we don't have to fully read all of them, but we pretty much have to fully read all of them.
Well, and that's the thing is, I'm not saying keep the meeting short no matter what. I'm saying keep it as short as possible, meaning do what needs to get done correctly, but don't fluff it with lots of droning on, and make sure that, when your committees are standing up, that they're efficient and not, you mean like, well, I'm just going to talk for 15 minutes when you're like, nope, just sum it up, keep it tight, and we can work on it with your committee outside.
Right.
And there's various ways you can tighten up your meeting. I mean, we have lots of lodges don't read their minutes, they post them. Trustees reports are posted, quick summaries. And, there's a lot of ways to be efficient, but there's also a lot of ways to be inefficient with a non-well-run meeting.
Right.
And that can drone on and be torture.
Right. Well, and I agree with you. I'm just saying sometimes it's unfortunately unavoidable. You'll just run into those circumstances where it's like, I wish I could do this differently, but you can't. And, I try to run a fairly keep it moving meeting, where you start to see that kind of stuff happen that you're talking about, the big inefficiencies in lodge meetings, is one, when somebody's either not prepared with the information they have on the subject they're going to speak about, or two, the committee, for whatever the committee is for, doesn't meet outside of the lodge room and essentially tries to do their committee meeting during a stated meeting by talking about how much soda they're going to buy for an event, for example. That meeting doesn't need to happen in the lodge room. That's why it's a committee. That should be happening outside of the lodge room so that the committee can then report to the lodge to respect everybody's time and to keep the meeting moving efficient.
Yeah, and that's the key is like, by respecting the opening and closing. I mean, it's really a lot of this stuff has to do with building a habit of excellence and building a habit of respecting the stated communication. And I think that the opening and closing serves as a function, as like a symbolic function. You had to go to practice. You had to make sure it was good. You had to do your homework. You had to treat it with respect. And I think that doing that practice on even a symbolic act before the actual act kind of puts your mind in the right framework to do the work. And it can bleed into other things too. And that's why I think it's so important that if lodges are like, okay, I'm trying to do couple of building years, we're trying to get our ship straightened out. One easy avenue to start with is get your opening and closing crisp. It's very achievable and very doable to get that sorted. And there's harder things you have to do to work on a lodge, and opening and closing is not one of them. It's a basic thing that I think has good ramifications for everything you do.
Well, and I think something that we're kind of alluding to here that we haven't really talked about is it develops discipline and fortitude if you set the goal of doing it well every time you do it and doing it properly. You're setting a standard of discipline in that this is how we're going to do it. We're going to practice it. We're going to do it right. We're going to do it well. That standard of discipline will then carry over into other things you do, like you were just saying, and will begin to develop fortitude, because once you develop the discipline to do it the right way, you have to have the fortitude to do it the right way every time.
Well, and
forward.
By observing the ritual with reverence and mindfulness and focus, that also develops prudence, because it opens your mind to it and it puts your mind focused. And within that is a great way to, without having to do any extra reading or work, just because you're already sitting in the meeting, to allow Masonry to do the work on you. And I think you can develop a lot within a standard state of communication just by working hard at making it go well and being present at it. We all like to putz on our phones, and usually you'll see the brothers who are notorious phone putzers will always putz on their phones.
Yep.
But I always try to keep my phone down through the entire meeting, except for if I need to look at my calendar to load events into it.
Yep, same here.
Because you should be able to say, I'm going to unplug and just synchronize with my brethren, and I'm just going to be present for this meeting.
Well, and I think the ability to unplug is an entire topic on its own.
It's a work in temperance.
Yeah,
that's a virtue in.
That's a whole topic on its own, because I can't count the number of things that irritate me when people are unable to unplug concerts when everybody's taking a video and the audio is going to suck anyways.
No one wants to watch those videos. I've never enjoyed watching one when I receded.
Right, and I've never enjoyed watching a concert through 20 other people's phones between me and the stage. So, yep. But yeah, that was a rabbit hole.
So I mean, the point is, there's a lot of things that you can actually use the stated meeting with its ritual to work on improving. If you like to be on your phone all the time and you use it as an opportunity, say, I'm going to set my phone down for this hour and a half, that's a good practice in temperance and control and self-control. So there's really a lot of things that you can use your stated, but the thing is like most things in Masonry, it's up to you to do that work and to take advantage of it. Because two people can experience the stated communication and the ritual and the open and closing in two different ways based on how they like to view it and what they put into it.
Right. And before we start wrapping this up, there is one thing that I think that we haven't really covered on this. If you're somebody who's maybe a little more uncomfortable talking in front of people still, or if you're somebody who's not 100% confident in your memorization skills or your floor work or stuff like that, this is an opportunity for you every month to work on those things and to build your confidence and improve in your skill set by taking it seriously and doing it right every time, because naturally you're going to get more comfortable talking in front of people because you're going to be doing it regularly. You're going to get more comfortable with the lines you need to say because you're going to be doing it regularly. And if you're on the floor, you're going to get more comfortable with your rod work and floor work because you're doing it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to become second nature, especially if you're doing it right, especially if you throw a couple of practices in there. It's going to be a confidence builder for you. And that confidence, for me, when I'm sitting in the East here and I do my opening well without really having to think about what I'm doing because it's just flowing, that makes the rest of the meeting go easier for me because I've already started by having done something well. So now my confidence level's up to carry me through all the business that might sometimes be difficult even, but my confidence level is already ready to go. Like, yes, I can do this because look at what I just did for opening, right? So it carries over into a lot of things. And I think more people need to understand that concept and start taking it seriously, because that's what it can do for you. It can be the beginning of very good things for your entire lodge if you actually just take it seriously.
It's transformative in its nature, and it wasn't put in our requirements just to be annoying. It's not there just to be annoying and old. It is serving an important function. And, if you start to treat it as something that is cutting into your meeting's time, you're doing it wrong. And, if you're in a pendant body that can do a short form or a quick open, it is not to the group's service to do so unless there's extreme circumstances. You shouldn't try to look at the opening and closing ritual as a place to cut the fat on the meeting, because it serves a very important function. So I guess my closing, unless you have something you'd like to say.
Oh, I was just going to tack on to that. Trying to short form your opening or closing or anything like that is like trimming your toenails to lose weight. It's 10 minutes off the front and 10 minutes off the back. Even if you contain your meeting to an hour of just solid stuff. Okay, so you went an hour and 20 minutes instead. You're fine. Do the opening and closing.
Yep. And I mean, it's some of these appendant bodies that have the ability to do so. Blue Lodge, you don't really get that option.
But a lot of those appendant bodies that have that option, their full form opening is also like half an hour. There's a big difference.
But the thing is, in one of the bodies I'm in, they can just call it open, and that's like a 5-minute. And it's like the regular one is 15 maybe. I understand if you're talking like the Templary where they have short and open form, because the long form is insane. Do that at least once a year, I would say.
Right.
But outside of that, really you should have some anxiety about cutting it, and you better make sure it's important if it's going to be cut for a good purpose, because if you make it a habit, it's actually not in the service, because you'll find too in some of those appendant bodies, people being able to do remember some of the symbols and stuff can get a little hazy. And then you go, well, what helps them remember all their symbols and stuff? The opening and closing.
Right.
And so it is important and shouldn't be canceled lightly and should be taken seriously. So my closing remarks basically on this topic is that opening and closing a lodge is not of a light and trifling nature, but it's of high importance and deep solemnity. It creates a space for us to work. It reminds us what makes us Masons and creates a strong shared experience that makes us feel the bonds of brotherly love between one another. It supports us growing not only as Masons, it also reminds us why we're here. When you miss lodge, you feel out of the loop, out of sync. We kind of went over that. That's important. It's important to remember. So next time you open and close your lodge, seek perfection in the ritual and pay attention. It's doing a lot more than you think.
I've been listening to a lot of Jocko Willink lately, so my final thought is going to be develop discipline and just do it.
Good. His words.
It's good.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, let's move on to news and events.
All right, now it's time for some news and events. And the first news story we have up is kind of a solemn story. We have Worshipful Brother Blaine Goldner from Milwaukee Harmony Lodge, who is currently having a little bit of medical issues. His kidney function is down at 19%, and he is desperately searching for a kidney donor. Unfortunately, his wife was not a match, and at least one brother has been tested who has not been a match either. Worshipful Brother Blaine has been master of Milwaukee Harmony 3 times, been secretary for a few years. He's a past high priest for Royal Arch Kilbourne chapter. It sounds like he's in the Grand Line for chapter. He's an active member of the Beja Shrine. He's part of the divan there. He's Scottish Rite Mason. He's also a roadrunner. He picked up a mom and daughter from Shriners Hospital in Chicago, bought them lunch, drove them home to the New London area recently. So please keep Brother Blaine in your Worshipful Brother Blaine in your thoughts and prayers. And if you have any chance or any interest in trying to discover if you are a match to be a kidney donor for Worshipful Brother Blaine, you can visit renewal, renewal.org, or you can email rn25979@renewal.org, or call them at 718-431-9831, extension 315. So please, if you have any interest in trying to help a brother out who has done a ton for his community and a ton for Masonry, and are interested in seeing if you would match to donate Worshipful Brother Blaine a kidney, please do so.
Definitely something that's very important, and it's very a hard decision to, try to offer up your kidney, but he is a brother, so if you do have the opportunity and you have the inkling, I know that it would go a really long way to at least get yourself tested and see if it would be a match. Moving on to our next news article. The Hayes boys have done something which, as Masons, we all take on as a responsibility, and they assisted one of their widows. So the brothers of James Hayes Lodge 331 recently assisted one of their widows, Jenna. So basically what was going on is she was trying to get a fence installed in her yard so that her young son could have a safe place, an outdoor environment to play and enjoy. But she needed some very large brush piles and stuff cleared to make room for the fencing company. And the brothers from Hayes responded to the call and went out there and helped her with that work. And I think that this is a really good example that, you know, sometimes when we're sitting there going, we need to help our widows, you kind of wonder, what do they need? How? It can be anything like this. Like even a pair of bodies able to help do a gutters or, like in this case, clear brush.
Oh, yeah.
Very important work and very good job to the Hayes boys.
Oh yeah, that's a great story to hear. I think we all have to remember our obligations sometimes a little bit more when it comes to assisting our widows. All right, on to events. May 3rd. Wisconsin 13 is hosting a trivia night. It's $10 per team, which includes refreshment. Teams are 4 people. It's at the Brookfield Masonic Center. Doors open at 6. Game starts at 6:30. There will be prizes for first, second, and best team name. Please reach out to Worshipful Brother Dan Pappas for more information. It would have been really fun to do that, but I'm turkey hunting that weekend. Otherwise, we could have shown up and just got 2 other guys. Time for fellowship team. I hope this event does really well because I think it's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
On May 2nd to the 4th, the Valley of Milwaukee Scottish Rite is having their spring reunion. So if you're a part of that, go ahead and enjoy. That'll be a good time.
There's an event that I lost in the lineup right there.
I see it.
It's listed twice.
That's all right. May 3rd, North Star Lodge number 187 in Star Prairie is having their annual smelt fry. 4:30 till fish supply runs out. On May 4th, Washburn Lodge number 145 is doing a grilled pork chop dinner from 3 to 6 p.m. $18 gets you 2 chops, $12 gets you 1 chop, comes with baked potato, your Masonic green beans, roll, choice of beverage, and a homemade dessert. That sounds like a pretty good deal, actually. Dine in or carry out at the Washburn Masonic Center. On May 11th, James Hayes Lodge number 331 is having their now annual Shed Lodge at 1 p.m. I know they'll have a trebuchet and some brisket and pulled pork and stuff like that. So go ahead and check it out. You can RSVP on our lodge page, and the cost is $30 a person. On May 16th, Wacoma Lodge number 90 in Cooksville is having their annual oyster stew and chili dinner from 5 to 8 p.m. for a $10 donation.
Coming up on the 18th of May, we got a meat raffle at the Beja Shrine. It's going to be from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. There's also the ever popular 50-50 raffle and bucket raffle. It's open to Masons, families, and friends, especially first responders. The meat boxes are valued at approximately $50 each. All the proceeds benefit the Wisconsin State Patrol through the Wisconsin Masonic Foundation. Also on the 18th is very busy. Also on the 18th, District 2 is having their Day of Light in Eau Claire at the Masonic Center up there. Please, if you're sending one through the Day of Light, RSVP with District 2 Deputy Bryce Franzway by the 12th of May. And yeah, you can reach out to him via his standard channels. Also on the 18th, Lake Country Freemasons Lodge number 42 is doing a brat fry. It's going to be from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. It's going to be at Sendex in Oconomowoc. It's going to be the one that's on Olympia Fields Drive. Also on the 18th, Valley of Madison Scottish Rite is doing a walk for dyslexia. It's going to be in-person registration at 7:30 a.m. at Brittingham Park, which is in Madison. The walk starts at 8:30 a.m. For more information, go walk4dyslexiamadison.org. That website again is walk4dyslexiamadison.org. On the 19th, we're having the 3rd annual Hartford Flea Market, Craft Fair, and Brat Fry, sponsored by Hartford Lodge number 120. It's going to go from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. It's going to be in Hartford, free admission. On the 26th, Wacoma Lodge number 90 is doing an oyster and stew grill. And then finally on the 31st, they're having the inaugural Grandmasters Open GMO charity golf outing to benefit the Children's Dyslexia Centers. It's going to be at the Scottish Rite of Eau Claire, Madison, and Milwaukee. Going to be hosting it. It's going to be at the House on the Rock Resort. Registration is at 9 a.m. Gun starts at 10:30.
Sweet.
That
All right.
happens.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Cool.
All right. Well, everybody have a good one. We will talk to you later.
Have a good one. Take care.